Hey, my name is Aidin Robbins, I'm a filmmaker, and I shoot a lot of stuff outside. Pretty much everything, actually. Most aspects of filmmaking are a bit trickier when you're outdoors. Getting clean audio, moving the camera, and especially lighting. You don't have control of the light, like the sun is always there and it moves. Setting up and powering heavy equipment and lights is a lot harder. Not to mention, if you're hiking into your location, you probably can't even haul them in the first place. The good news is that you can still pull off some incredible lighting setups outdoors. You just have to get a little more creative and do some more problem solving. So in this video, I want to share with you some basic techniques, along with some specific lighting setups that I've used for getting really interesting footage outdoors. Right now, I'm being lit by my gigantic Aperture 120D. I love this light, but I can't take it here, or especially not here. So what kind of lights can you use for outdoor shooting? Well, I like to use small battery-powered lights. They're a lot lighter to carry around when you're out shooting, and they also don't require you to worry about powering a gigantic studio light outside. Lately, I've been using these tiny Godox light panels. They fit really easily into my bag. They're super light, but they get really bright and give me a lot of control over the brightness and color temperature of the light. I've also used these portable Godox tube lights in the past, as well as the Lume Cube Panel Pro and the Lume Cube Panel Mini. All of these are great options for outdoor shooting. In addition to small lights, you can also use a 5-in-1 reflector to modify the existing natural light in the scene. We'll talk a bit more about that in a minute. Now, before we start adding in lights, it's important to be able to work with the existing natural light in the setting. And we've made an entire separate video about this, so I won't dwell on it too much, but let's go over some basic scenarios. There are three main factors to consider: the time of day, the angle of light, and the weather. So here's an example shot on a cloudy, overcast day, which gives the light a soft, smoothed out look, kind of like using a softbox. If we were using an actual softbox, then we could change the appearance of the light by moving that light around, but we can't move the sun. So to achieve the same effect, we'll just move the camera. You can adjust the camera angle so that the sun is to either side of both the camera and the subject. That'll give you a classic kind of side lit setup. You can also shoot with the sun behind the subject and in front of the camera. That way you'll have a backlit setup. The list goes on. And here's another example shot on a sunny day, but with the sun low in the sky around sunrise. That gives us a much more dramatic look, much more direct light without the cloud's diffusion. And again, we can adjust the angle of the light by moving the camera around the subject. Recently, I was shooting a project about the redwoods in California, and every morning the sun would cut through these gigantic trees and cast these really interesting pockets of light and shadow. And that's the magic of working with natural light. It can be really frustrating, but sometimes it does stuff like this. Depending on your shot, just changing the camera angle might not be quite enough, and that's where something like this 5-in-1 reflector comes in really handy by giving you several options to modify sunlight. As the name implies, this has 5 sides and 5 different uses. First, you have this white bounce, which you can use to bounce the light back onto the other side of your subject and create a fill light. There's also a gold side and a silver side, which do the same thing with a more intense look. This middle part is translucent and can be used for diffusion. So if I place this in between myself and my key light, you can see that light becomes a lot softer. And if you're working with direct natural light, that can really change the quality of the light on your subject. There's also this black negative fill side that you can use to prevent light from bouncing onto your subject and creating a fill light. That's not particularly useful for sunlight unless maybe it was already overcast and you wanted to make that light more dramatic. If you're shooting a person outside in natural light and want to make sure that light is nice and diffused and soft on their skin, this is how you're gonna do that. All right, we've talked about natural light, we've talked about modifying natural light. Let's move on to the fun part, which is adding additional lights into the scene. Starting out with practicals, lights that are visible in the scene, like these lamps behind me. The vast majority of my outdoor lighting setups are just practicals added into a dark scene. I'm shooting at blue hour or in complete darkness and adding just 1 or 2 lights that are visible in the shot. Like a flashlight, a headlamp, maybe car headlights, It's really simple, but you can get creative with it and get some very interesting results. So let's talk about some specific examples. Here's a scene where we have several people running through the forest, and we wanted to emphasize this kind of lush, mysterious setting by bringing individual pieces of the scene into the light. So I just had everyone carry a flashlight and framed my shots so that as they all ran past, they would illuminate these individual like ferns and leaves, different elements of the scene placed in the foreground. Here's another example using car headlights. Since we were shooting in foggy conditions, those headlights create these big beams which add a ton of depth to the shot, especially when you're moving the camera through them. Here's another example with car headlights. Here's an example with flashlights. I could go on all day, but I won't. So let's talk about hidden lights. One step past using practicals is hiding artificial light in the scene, and that's where these small battery-powered lights become really useful. Here's a more subtle example, just a nice soft warm light inside the car to contrast with the outdoor ambience. Sometimes you might opt to use a hidden light in the place of a practical, like in these shots I wanted to have the light on inside the tent, but my actual tent lantern is not that bright and it's daylight balanced, so it doesn't create that much contrast from the blue outside. So I just took the Godox panels we talked about earlier, made the color temperature really warm, and put those inside the tent, kind of pretending that they were the tent lantern, just a much brighter, warmer version. And finally, the most advanced I'll usually go is to fake natural light using one of these artificial hidden lights. Here's an example where we took one of those little light panels, set it to a really cool color temperature, and hid it right outside the frame. So it mimics moonlight coming through the window, creating a rim light on the subject and a shadow on the wall. Here's a more subtle example where I'm shooting in the trunk of my car, which is completely in shadow. So I've just added one of these little light panels set to a daylight balance temperature to create a fake fill light from the sun outside. And before you go, here's one final example combining several of the techniques we talked about here. We're shooting at blue hour to get that blue glow in the sky peeking through the trees. I'm holding a flashlight, a practical, which is illuminating both myself and the cabin. And finally, there's a light panel hidden in the top of the cabin set to a fire setting to create, the look of a fire inside. Now picture that same shot in the middle of a sunny day. So there's harsh, undiffused light, no flashlight, you can't even see the light from the fireplace in the cabin. We're shooting outside, we don't have full control of the light, but by being creative and being intentional with the lighting, we're able to create a really interesting scene. But that's all I have for you today. I hope you enjoyed this video, learned something new from it, and if you did, be sure to check out the other installments of this filmmaking series. I lose track, but I think this is like the 12th, maybe even 13th episode, so we've gone over a lot more than just outdoor lighting setups. And of course, be sure to subscribe to Adorama TV so you don't miss out on thousands of other great videos, including the next installment of this series. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you there.